Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunda Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunda Bihari Kopijana Balaba Grivadari Jaya Grivadari Kopijana Balaba Grivadari Jaya Grivadari Yasodanandana Raja Dhanaranjana Jaya Raja Dhanaranjana Yasodanandana Raja Dhanaranjana Jaya Raja Dhanaranjana Yasodanandana Raja Dhanaranjana Jaya Raja Dhanaranjana Yamuna Tiravarachari Jaya Kunda Bihari Yamuna Tiravarachari Jaya Kunda Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Kunda Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunda Bihari Gopidana Balaba Grivadari Jaya Grivadari. Gopidana Balaba Grivadari Jaya Grivadari. Yasodanandana Brajadana Ranjana Jaya Brajadana Ranjana. Yasodanandana Brajadana Ranjana Jaya Brajadana Ranjana. Yamunatiravarachari Jaya Kunja Vihari. Yamunatiravarachari Jaya Kunja Vihari. Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari. Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahangsa Brahmadakacharya Asadhara Sadushi Shiman. His Divine Grace Shalasi Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Raj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande Haribo Slava Zabrani Bhaktam Slava Shri Guru Shri Garangi. Namo Vishnu Vadaya Krishna Prasthapute Srimate Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Tanamane. Namaste Saraswati Deve. Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shrunivadi Paskyatyade Sadarana. Om Agana Timanandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Budale Swayam Rupa Kadamaya Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Pridana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shiva Sakansitamscha, Hey Krishna Karna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate, Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute, Tapta Kanshena Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari, Prishubhanu Sudadevi Pranamami Hari Priye, Vanchakapa Tuvyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha, Patiranam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pranityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 5, the Rasa Muni's Life Spared, text number 25. Evam vida neka guna sarajana Paratmani Brahmani Vasudeve Kriya Kalapai Samuha Bhaktim Yavi Rinchyan Nirayam Chakara Evam Vada Neka Gunasaraja Paratmani Brahmani Vasudeve Kriya Kalapai Samuvaha Bhaktim Yaya Virinchan Nirayam Chakara. Evam Budane Haguna Saraja Paratmani Brahmani Vasudeve Kriya Kalapai Samuvaha Bhaktim Yavirinchan Niram Shakara. Lady. Evam Vidane Haguna Saraja Paratmani Brahmani Vasudeve Akarapai Samavaha Bhaktim. Ladies. Vamvadanena Guna Saraja Paratmani Brahmani Vasudeve Kriya Kalapai Samavaha Bhaktim Yaya Vichinchan Dvaram Shakara. Evam. In this way, Vida Aneka Guna, endowed with varieties of good qualities. Sa Hi Maharaj Ambrisha Raja, the king, Paramatmani, unto the super soul, Brahmani, unto Brahman, Vasudeva, unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, Vasudeva. Kriya Kalapai, by practical activities. Samubhaha, executed. Bhakti, devotional service. Yaya, by such activities. Avirinchan, beginning from the topmost planet. Narayan, down to the hellish planets. Chakara, he experienced that there is danger everywhere. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. In this way, because of devotional service, Maharaj Ambrisha, who was endowed with varieties of transcendental qualities, was completely aware of Brahman, Paramatma, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And thus he executed devotional service perfectly. Because of his devotion, he thought even the topmost planet of this material world no better than the hellish planets. Purport. An exalted and pure devotee like Maharaj Ambrisha is in full awareness of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. In other words, devotee of Vasudeva, or Vasudeva, Krishna, is in full knowledge of the other features of the Absolute Truth. The Absolute Truth is realized in three features: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavan iti Shabdyate. A devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, knows everything. Vasudeva Sarvam iti. Because Vasudeva, Krishna, includes both Paramatma and Brahman, one does not have to realize Paramatma by the yoga system, for the devotee always thinking of Vasudeva is the topmost yogi. Yoginam api sarvesham. And as far as jnana is concerned, if one is a perfect devotee of Vasudeva, he is the greatest Mahatma. Vasudeva sarvam iti sar Mahatma sudurlabhaha. A Mahatma is one who has full knowledge of the Absolute Truth. Thus, Maharaj Ambrisha, being a devotee of the Personality of Godhead, was in full awareness of Brahman, or Paramatma, Brahman, Maya, the material world, the spiritual world, and how things are going on everywhere. Everything was known to him. Yasmin vigyate sarvam eva vigyatam bhavati. Because the devotee knows Vasudeva, he knows everything within the creation of Vasudeva. Vasudeva sarvamiti saramahatma sudurlabhaha. Such a devotee does not give much value to the highest standard of happiness within this material world. Narayana parasarve kutasana bhivyati swaga apavarga narakeshu apitulyartha darshanaha. Because he is fixed in devotional service, a devotee does not regard any position in the material world as important. Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati has therefore written the Chaitanya Chandramita. Kaivalyam narakayate tridashapura kashapushpayate Dora Dentendriya Kalasarpa Patali Prokata Damstrayate Vishvam Purna Sukhayate Vidi Mahendra Tischa Katayate Yak Karuna Kataksha Vaibhavam Vatam Tam Goram Evastumaha. For one who becomes a pure devotee through devotional service, two great personalities like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Kaivalya, emerging into Brahman, appears no better than hell. As far as heavenly planets are concerned, to a devotee, they're like a phantasmagoria, or the will of the wisp. And as far as yoga perfection is concerned, a devotee does not care a fig for such perfection. Since the purpose of yoga perfection is achieved automatically by the devotee, this is all possible when one becomes a devotee of the Lord through the medium of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instructions. So the text again. In this way, because the devotional service, Maharaj Ambrisha, who is endowed with varieties of transcendental qualities, was completely aware of Brahman, Paramatma, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus he executed devotional service perfectly because of his devotion. He thought even the topmost planet of this material world no better than the hellish planets. Namo Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shinivadi Paskyatyade Sadharana. Brahman, Brahmaiti, Paramatmaiti, Bhagavan, Iti Shabdyate. So these are conceptions that at least intellectually we could try to understand. And how to understand these things, even intellectually, that's the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita. Or as Prabhupada writes, in the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, the spirit soul has been explained as non-material. Spirit soul capable of elevating himself to self-realization by different kinds of yogas. At the end of the 6th chapter, it's clearly explained that the steady concentration of the mind upon Krishna, or Krishna consciousness, is the highest form of all yoga. By concentrating one's mind upon Krishna, one can know everything in full, namely Brahman, Paramatma, the material nature, and its manifestations within Saris. Therefore, one should begin yoga practice, as explained in the last verse of the 6th chapter. Steady concentration of the mind upon Krishna is made possible by 9 different types of devotional service, of which Shravanam, hearing, is the first and most important. Therefore the Lord says, touch Shanu, hear from me. No one could be a better authority than Krishna, and therefore by hearing from Krishna, one becomes a perfectly Krishna conscious person. In other words, there are different types of processes that explain the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, such mainly karma yoga. Karma yoga means to understand that everything here belongs to Krishna. One who accepts that everything belongs to Krishna, then he's a perfect karma yogi. And because everything belongs to Krishna, everything is meant to be utilized in Krishna's service. If we don't utilize things in Krishna's service, then we're put into the illusory energy. Krishna, Bahir Mukha, Bhogavan Chetare, Nikatasta Maya, Japatiyadare. Krishna, Bahir Mukha, as soon as we forget Krishna, as soon as we turn our face away from Krishna, then Maya is standing right by us, and she puts us into the material nature. She actually slaps us into the material concept of life. So karma yoga means this is Krishna's energy. Don't even bother looking and don't touch it. Utilize it in Krishna's service. find out what Krishna wants us to do. Generally in the Varna and Ashram system, it's easy to know what to do. If you were born in a certain position, generally in a certain family, generally you had those qualities because the family, at that time their consciousness was more or less stable. People born in a certain family were born by parents who had a certain standard mentality, generally higher than our present mentality. They were actually situated in some mode. We're situated in all the modes except for usually goodness. But they were actually situated in some mode, and therefore the children that were born to them were also situated in some mode. Therefore, from their birth, they knew what to do. They were trained what to do. And if there was some difference, for instance, one boy approached Gautama Muni and asked if he could become his disciple. And Gautama Muni asked the boy, who is your father? Because generally speaking, the Brahmins only accepted other Brahmins as their disciples. Because if you don't accept a Brahmin as your disciple, you can tell them, you can talk to them or preach to them or instruct them for millions of years. They won't understand anything you're talking about. It's like taking a dog as your disciple and trying to explain the Vedas to him. He's not going to, the knowledge will not sink into his heart very profoundly, no matter how much you explain. Therefore, Brahmins only accepted other Brahmins as their disciples. So he asked the boy, who's your father? And the boy went and said, he told Gautama Muni that I'll ask my mother. In other words, his mother was a woman of the society women, or a prostitute. So he didn't know who his father was. Generally speaking, if you ask someone who your father is, it's a little embarrassing to say you don't know. So Gautama Muni accepted him as his disciple because he was truthful. He had the quality of a Brahmin, being truthful. So, karma yoga begins when you understand if you're a Brahmin, you're a Kshatriya, you're a Vaishya, a Shudra, but we don't know who we are. Not only we don't know who we are spiritually, we don't even know who we are materially. And we try to analyze, we go to the learned astrologer, and he looks at our chart and says, I can't figure out who you are either. It's too complicated. But one thing I could see clearly, you're not the most high-class Brahmin. So in this age, without knowing who we are, what our karma yoga is, then we engage our activities in the Sankirtan movement. If we know something about Krishna, if we're actually inclined to read the books, or if we're in class and we actually remember something when we walk out, then we have some Brahminical qualities. Or we listen to a lecture 50 times and we suddenly remember what the first couple of words are, what it's all about. And we can remember who spoke the lecture. Then we're doing pretty good. So then we're a Brahmin, then we can repeat what we heard to others. That doesn't mean we become God. I know everything, because I can repeat what I've heard. But at least, so Prabhupada said, one should not decry Krishna and try to claim oneself to have Krishna's position just because a partial accumulation of a little bit of knowledge. Anyhow, if that's our propensity, then we can tell people about Krishna. And good practice is to go out and try to distribute a book. Because if you can tell strangers about Krishna, hopefully you can also tell people you know about Krishna. And if one has so much of a taste or a desire, propensity or an ability or the opportunity to tell people about Krishna, then one could try to help organize the Sankirtan movement. One should fight for Krishna. Rather than to creating one's own kingdom, one should fight for Krishna's kingdom. Like Arjuna fought. In the beginning, he didn't want to fight against his relatives. Just like we may go on the street and think, well, everyone's happy, so why should I bother them? Why should I disturb them? They have a nice car. They probably live in a nice house. They have a dog in the front, looks pretty good. So they're probably pretty happy. Why should I disturb them? Tell them about Krishna. No, we should understand that everyone needs Krishna. No one can be happy without Krishna. And therefore, if one can't preach, at least one could try to help organize the Sankirtan movement. And if one can't do that, there's no opportunity, then at least one can utilize whatever resources one has. If one has a tendency for business, for making money, or at least getting paper or plastic money, whatever it is, then one can utilize those things in the service of the Supreme Lord. And if we can't do anything, at least take prasadam and chant Hare Krishna. And carry a flag on Padayatra. So, and what is the whole aim of this? The whole aim, we're doing our duty. So if we do that, then our mind will become a little peaceful. Because I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm doing it for Krishna. So my mind becomes peaceful. Then I'll be able to hear something. We're in ignorance because we can't hear the reality. We hear we're not this body. We hear the body's changing. We say, sure, that's right. Well, hey, it makes a lot of sense. And then we go, oh, I'm this body, I'm this body. Because we don't hear very clearly. Therefore we hear it, but our intelligence is not so strong to capture it. But if we become a peaceful mind and we hear, then that hearing, that vibration, will actually increase our intelligence so we can experience it. We have to have some faith in the sound vibration. We may not have faith in the person who's speaking, but at least have faith in the knowledge. And if we hear it with attention, then we'll experience it at least a little bit more than we're already experiencing it. So that's, and because after all, in the absence of the desire to just hear and chant about Krishna, because that's sufficient. In the spiritual world, everything is simply a glorification of Krishna. There's no need to go out and spread the Sankirtan movement in the spiritual world, because that's what's going on. Everyone's engaged in the Sankirtan movement. There's no one in Maya there. So, of course, that's one opportunity we have here that you can't do in the spiritual world. You can't preach in the spiritual world, but here you can preach. Here you can actually save people. There's no one to save. Everyone is fully liberated. So that's karma yoga. Try to find out what we can do for Krishna in this age. Don't worry if we're a Brahmin, a Shudra, a Vaishya, a Kshatriya. Just do something for the Sankirtan movement. Do anything for the Sankirtan movement. And then that will help us remember Krishna, which is the perfection of the Varna and Ashram system. Then we can actually get knowledge. And what is knowledge? Is very complicated. You have to read millions of books to get knowledge. Now, knowledge is that we're not the body. And that Paramatma is in our heart. He's telling us we're not this body. We have God in our heart. It's not that we have to go looking for God in the woods or go to some Vaikuntha planet to find God. God is right there in our heart. We just have to listen to Him. And if we listen to Him, we follow His directions, either through Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, or if we're fortunate enough to be able to hear Him directly within our heart and follow His instructions, then He'll reveal Himself. That's called Krishna consciousness. And the topmost knowledge is that the Supreme Person, the source of everything, the absolute truth, is the most beautiful person. unlimitedly beautiful, kind, merciful, attractive. That's the highest truth. That the highest truth is not the devil. The highest truth is the most, that why is it this world is so horrible? A little baby is born and dies immediately. What kind of God is that? No, God is the most merciful, but this material world is an instruction. If someone does something out of envy or whatever, or causes someone's life to be taken, then one may have to come back and have their life taken as a lesson, so that one will become more careful in the future. So that's called jnana. So in the third chapter, Krishna talks about karma yoga. In the fourth chapter, he talks about jnana yoga. In the fifth chapter, he talks about the combination of jnana and yoga, jnana and karma. And in the sixth chapter, he talks about the perfection of this jnana and yoga, which is to meditate on Krishna, to think about Krishna. And in the seventh chapter, Krishna says, you don't have to go through this whole thing, just try to listen. Which is difficult enough. Maybe it's easier to go through the karma yoga, jnana yoga, astanga yoga, than to listen. So, this process ultimately winds up and brings us to the platform of becoming aware of Krishna, and as explained in this verse, that all exalted devotees, they're fully conscious of Krishna. Therefore, they're not ordinary personalities. Just like Srila Prabhupada, to ordinary persons, including his followers, the disciples, he appeared to be ordinary. But he was never under the material energy. He was fully under Krishna's. What we saw as Prabhupada's pastimes are simply Krishna's manifestation in this world of the spiritual energy, what the spiritual energy is like in the material world. So if we read in some, like the Lilamrita, Prabhupada was perplexed. Prabhupada was never perplexed, any more than Krishna was perplexed when someone like Shalva came with his Shalva, and Shalva was a demon, by the way, a real demon. And Shalva was fighting against Krishna. Shalva was a friend of Shishupal and others, and therefore he got disturbed, and he wanted to kill Krishna and wipe out the whole dynasty of the Yadus. So he got the benediction from Lord Shiva. He could make a plane that would be menacing to the Yadavas. He flew it over Dwarka, tried to destroy the city. Not recommended for anyone to try to do that. In any case, it was a big fight. Krishna came back from Hastinapur with Balaram, and they got engaged in the fight. Shalva, his plane got knocked down by Krishna, etc. It's pretty, according to the eyewitnesses, it was quite an amazing battle. Something that you can make a movie about. In any case, Shalva, in order to bewilder Krishna, came with his father. Balaram was supposedly Balaram was in Dwarka protecting the Yadavas. But Shalva came with his father, and in front of Krishna, he cut off Krishna's head. Not Krishna's head, Vasudev's head, Krishna's father's head. So momentarily, Krishna appeared to be bewildered. Even Shalva came later on, and he hit Krishna with his club, and Krishna dropped his saranga bow. What? He's got this little Shalva, he hit Krishna and he dropped his bow? What kind of God is that? So the commentators say, they explain, that actually this is Krishna. Unless he did things like that, it wouldn't be very exciting. If Krishna always showed his godly opulence and acted as if he was God, oh, hit me again, I'm God, doesn't even affect me. No, so Krishna makes it more exciting by dropping his saranga bow. At the end, Shalva he got his head cut off, he got his arm cut off, then he got his head cut off. And all bets were on Krishna anyhow. He had all odds that he was going to win the fight. But to make it more exciting, then Krishna has so many pastimes. When the cowherd boys entered into the mouth of Aghasura, Krishna momentarily was confused, apparently. He didn't know what to do. He was amazed at his illusory energy. And the demigods were going, alas, alas, what's going to happen? Then Krishna entered into the mouth. And the demigods were freaking out, as they say in English. What's happening? Krishna is so foolish, he himself entered into the mouth of the demon. And of course Krishna, he did it purposely, make it exciting. Then he expanded himself and suffocated the demon. So similarly, the pastimes of someone like Srila Prabhupada, they appear to be mundane to mundaners. But for one who's actually self-realized, one who's actually on that platform, realize it's all being conducted by the illusory energy. Prabhupada was never bewildered. He was never an ordinary person in any time. He was a Nitya Siddha devotee, according to his own explanation. And therefore, when we have to be careful when we read things about Prabhupada, because generally speaking, everyone sees things, Atmanam Manyate Jagat, everyone sees things from their point of view. And especially if you write a book when you're in the movement for 10 years, then the way you see things is probably not 100% the way things actually are. And maybe after 100 years, we may not see things exactly as they are. So we should be careful and understand that whatever Prabhupada did, they're all divine pastimes of Krishna, meant to encourage people at least to take up the process of devotional service. Just like Prabhupada, just like Krishnadas Kaviraj said, that I'm the lowest of everyone. I'm the lowest. I'm even lower than the worm and stool. That anyone who chants his name, he loses all his good qualities. Does that mean that Krishnadas Kaviraj, the exalted compiler of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, was low in the worm and stool? No, it means that he was feeling like that. Well, we should understand that feeling means that he sees everyone as wonderful and beautiful except for himself. It's not that he's in ignorance or lamenting. He sees everything wonderful and beautiful. He sees everything in relation to Krishna, and he's in love with everyone and everything. Therefore, he feels himself insignificant. On the other hand, someone who has exalted material qualities and is very proud, he thinks he's lovable and everyone else is insignificant. That's the difference between a pure devotee and a person who's in ignorance. Just like we have the example of Kishore Das Babaji, that at the end of life, when he left his body, he declared that his useless body should be dragged through the streets of Navadvip. So the Babajis thought, this is a good idea. Let's fulfill his last wish and drag his body through the streets of Navadvip. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, he stopped those Babajis and said, okay, anyone who, I'm his disciple, but anyone who claims that he's worthy of fulfilling Krishna's Babaji's, Kishore Das Babaji's last words, let him step forward and take the body if he hasn't had sex life in the last year. course, there, the Babajis, they didn't necessarily have physical sex life, but even mentally thinking about sex life is considered a fall down for them. So it went on for the last year, then it's the last month, the last day, and none of them stepped forward. And then, of course, we know that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada took his body and put it in samadhi. So the point is that we should not try to figure out what the position of a pure devotee is, because unless we're a pure devotee, we won't be able to understand. But we can get a little glimpse, as much as we're in the spiritual energy, we can see that that experience is not something ordinary. We get a little taste of Ladini Shakti, a little happiness in Krishna consciousness. We know we're coming from another realm of experience. So what to speak of someone who's unlimitedly in that realm of experience. Even Baba, the ecstasy we may feel, sometimes that little Baba, the actual stage of Baba when one is always in Baba, always feeling ecstasy, is just one ray of light, of sunlight, compared to the whole sunshine and prema. So one who's actually situated in prema or beyond, we should not try to estimate them and try to just appreciate they're beyond the material existence. They're not experiencing, just like one of the qualities of pure devotional service is Krishna Karshani. What is that? That they feel unlimited pleasure. Their intense spiritual pleasure. Sandarandi Vishay Atma. They experience unlimited transcendental pleasure, so much pleasure, they're not even aware of the material existence. They see only the spiritual experience or existence. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Yes.
Thank you for inspiring lecture. I would just like to ask, when you mentioned that Krishna says that we can just listen to him and that this is much easier process than other option. And so I would just like to ask, what are some most important principles for good listening?
Go to sleep early. And don't eat too much at night. That's probably the two most significant things. And try to sit up as soon as we either go up or we go down. Because if there's too much in the stomach, we generally go down. Try to compress all the things there. So go to sleep, get enough rest. If we don't get enough rest, we're going to have to sneak in a little rest during class. And don't eat too much at night. And try to sit up straight. Anything else?
There are some questions on the internet.
Okay.
From Avaduta Raya Prabhu. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in Srimad Bhagavatam 12.6.27, the killing of snakes done already was not a sin for Janamejaya, since all creatures suffer their fate. Question: so similarly, if I would kill some animals, I would not get reactions for that. I don't think so. Can you please clarify what Vishwanath says?
I don't know, because I don't know fully what he said. In any case, he was doing a sacrifice. But whether he got reactions or not, when we kill something, it's usually not in sacrifice, according to the prescribed methodology. But I'm not so sure about, it wasn't a good idea for Janmanjaya to kill all the snakes in the world who were not responsible for the death of his father, and therefore I believe it was the head of the snakes, Kashyapa came and stopped him from doing it. It's not that you can kill anything. Even in sacrifice, you can get away with it. Anything else?
There is another question on the internet. Baladev in his Gita Bhasya writes, having brought time, lust and other factors under control, they are free from the faults arising from these factors. Question: how one can bring under control the time factor?
Engage in pure devotional service without failing in all circumstances. Then you transcend the modes of material nature and come to the level of Brahman. Mam chaya vyabcharena bhakti-yogena sevate sagunan samatityayatam brahma bhuya kalpate. Controlling the senses and mind means engaging them in Krishna service. And when we do that, then Krishna appears and he controls our senses and mind. Rishikesha rishikena sevaya bhakti uchite. That's called bhakti. When the master of the senses takes charge of our senses and fills them with transcendental energy, then that's called controlling them, when they're used in Krishna service. Kvala Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande.